The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I feel stupidly underqualified to talk about this, the most well-known psalm in the world. Volumes over have been written on this little chapter with only 6 verses. There's no way I could contribute anything that hasn't already been said. I would just like to share with y'all 3 overarching points about the 23rd Psalm. The first thing I would like to take note of is the starting point of the psalm. All of the familiar and timeless images of the 23rd Psalm are because the Lord is my shepherd. The reason David can say, I shall not want, is because he acknowledged the Lord is my shepherd. The reason David could walk through the valley of the shadow of death and fear no evil was because the Lord his shepherd was with him. So before you rush into the rest of the psalm, dwell on that statement. The Lord is my shepherd. Before you start trying to wrap your mind around what it means for your soul to be restored, to walk in paths of righteousness, or to have a table prepared in the presence of your enemies, first ask yourself how acquainted you are with the Lord as your shepherd. What does it mean that you have a shepherd? If the Lord is your shepherd, what does that make you? His sheep. Do you know how dependent a sheep is on its shepherd? Completely. Everything from sustenance, exercise, hygiene, and protection, a sheep is too incompetent to consistently provide for itself. So not only does the psalm begin with the Lord, it ends with the Lord. The Lord isn't just your friend, your coach, your doctor, your teacher. He is your shepherd. The second overarching point on the 23rd Psalm I would like to make is about its writer, David. David was a human being just like you and me. It is often a bad habit that subtly sneaks into the thought processes of even experienced and mature Bible students that the writers of and people in biblical books were not like us. We distance ourselves from biblical figures like Moses, Elijah, Hannah, Esther, Mary, Peter, and Paul because they saw or experienced things greater than we have. And while that may be true, we shouldn't let that negate the fact that they were people of like passions as we are, which is certainly true of David. David did not write the 23rd Psalm as someone who never struggled in his walk with God. He knew what it was like to feel overlooked and forgotten by people and by God. David knew what it felt like when the future is so uncertain, all you can do is live life one day at a time. David was painfully acquainted with the guilt and shame of when a past sin catches up to your present and its effects tear into your future. David knew what it was like to become so prosperous and comfortable that you neglect your relationship with God. David was a man that wanted much, and often wanted the wrong things. He needed to be made to lie down and rest. He couldn't find still waters on his own. He often needed his soul to be restored over and over again. He would often fail at walking in paths of righteousness. He faced circumstances when death was the worst possible outcome. He had enemies, and he had mistakes that followed him all the days of his earthly life. David wasn't divinely inspired to write the 23rd Psalm just for other people. It was equally written for his own benefit. While David obviously had his faults that dragged him down, he also had his moments of seemingly pure devotion to the Lord, uninterrupted peace with the Lord, and admirable strength in the Lord. David, as a sinner in a sinful world, experienced the spiritual highs and lows of walking with the Lord, just like we do. And David would wrestle to believe these words, just like we do. Now, the third and final overarching point I'd like to make about the 23rd Psalm. You'll notice, out of all 6 verses, you aren't told to do anything. There are implications, things that are implied that we ought to do, based on what our shepherd is actively doing and will do, regardless of what we are going through or doing, but we are not explicitly told to do anything. Between the shepherd and you, the shepherd is the one who is active, while you are mostly passive. He is the one who is making you lie down, leading you beside still waters, restoring your soul, and preparing a table before you. You are not doing these things for yourself. You don't have the strength to. This personally reminds me of Paul's letter to the Ephesians, in which, before Paul started instructing those believers on how to walk and stand as a Christian in the world, he spent the first 3 chapters explaining how they had been made to sit together in heavenly places in Christ Jesus. Christianity isn't a promise that you will never want or feel empty inside, but that Christ is able to satisfy your wants, restore your soul, and will someday take you home where you will never lack again. Christianity isn't a promise that you will never have nightmares that keep you from sleeping, but that Christ can speak peace to your heart so that you can lie down. Christianity isn't a promise that you'll never fall or stumble off the path of righteousness, but that He is able to heal your backslidings, properly treat the wounds you received, and bring you back as though you never fell. Christianity isn't a promise that you'll never face death, but that Christ will see you through safely to the other side. The 23rd Psalm exists because the shepherd is loving, providing for, and protecting his sheep. The beautiful scenes, pictures, and descriptions of the 23rd Psalm are the spiritual reality in the life of the believer, whether they remember them or not, acknowledge them or not. The Good Shepherd, Jesus Christ, is daily providing what David talks about in the 23rd Psalm to every believer. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." If you would like to support this ministry and see more devotionals like this, please consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon for as little as $2 a month. Thanks for listening. Grace and peace.